Thank you so much for this introduction. Thank you so much for the invitation. This is my first time in Rwanda. I'm delighted. I love the climate. The hills are beautiful. So as Ted mentioned, I am probably one of the few, if not the only person who's not doing clinical research here. I'm doing mostly preclinical research using non-human primates, which I hope to cover in a little bit more detail in my slides. So this is my financial disclosure slide. I'm going to try to go a little faster with the introduction. I'm sure everybody knows about the significance and relevance of vertical transmission of HIV and the barriers that we face it. So in 2023, there were 1.4 million children living with the virus. Less than half were virologically suppressed. Without ART, children, especially young infants, experience faster disease progression and higher mortality rates than adults, which emphasizes the need for starting antiretroviral therapy as early as possible. And when we do that, we limit the reservoir formation, we preserve immune function, and in some instances, like Roger said, we can even achieve a post-ATI control. There are, however, significant barriers to treating children with HIV. And even when ART is available and starts early, children experience high rates of virologic failure, approximately 10 times higher than adults for a variety of reasons, including non-adherence, drug toxicity, resistance, and of course, a stigma. We have high hopes for long-acting antiretrovirals for preventing and treating pediatric HIV infection, but their rollout in children has been slow and questions remain about their access in resource-limited settings. I'm sure everybody in this room knows that the world is changing fast, has been changing fast over the last few months, and it's really emphasizes the notion that we cannot continue relying on supplies of drugs without interruption, which to me emphasizes that we really need a scalable and reliable interventions that, to achieve control of viremia in a durable way. So I think one of the ways that we can achieve this is through broadly neutralizing antibodies, or bNAbs. So depicted here on this slide is a cartoon of the envelope spike protein, which decorates the surface of HIV virions. And so far, dozens of these bNAbs have been isolated, targeted different regions of this protein. For the purpose of my talk, I will be focusing on two molecules, one targeting the V3 glycan epitope called 101074, which is the molecule that seemed to play a very significant role in Roger's studies, and also an antibody-like molecule called eCD4IG, which targets the CD4 binding site. So there are many advantages for using passive immunization with bNAbs for tackling pediatric HIV infection. I think first and foremost, it's safe in children and infants. Pre-exposure and post-exposure prophylaxis with antibodies can prevent or attenuate SIV or simian HIV infection in infant macaques. And of course, we now have clinical evidence of antiviral efficacy thanks to the efforts of my colleague Roger and his partners in the Tatella study. And there is even evidence that the caretakers for those children would actually prefer the bNAb infusions instead of antiretroviral therapy for maintaining virologic control of the children. So this is what a typical protocol for evaluating the therapeutic efficacy of HIV bNAbs looks like. You have someone who has the virus, enrolls in a study, receives antiretroviral therapy, the viremia is suppressed, and then the person starts receiving infusions of these bNAbs, and if the person harbors viruses that are susceptible to the bNAbs, ART can stop without triggering virus rebound. However, if the infusions stop, or if these plasma concentrations fall below therapeutic levels, the virus will, in many cases, if not most, come back roaring. So we have learned a lot about bNAb-based immunological control of HIV through studies like these. But they should continue. These settings provide a remarkable source of information. But of course, there are caveats to studies like this, which is the most important of which, in my view, is that they require repeated infusions of these molecules, which can be expensive and difficult to implement, especially in research, in resource-poor settings. So what my group is asking is, what if instead of these repeated infusions of these molecules, what if we could engineer the body to produce these molecules, thereby obviating the need for these recurring visits, right? And this is exactly what we are trying to achieve with gene therapy using this viral vector called adeno-associated virus, or AAV. So here we essentially clone the DNA sequence for the bNAbs into the AAV vector, and this virus has a number of advantages, and the most significant of which for this application is that it can transduce a large number of cells and deliver its genome to the nucleus of cells, where the genome will persist in episomes, these circularized structures of DNA. And in the nucleus, these episomes can drive transcription of the bNAb, resulting in persistent expression of those molecules. So essentially, you're converting your own cells into bioreactors for bNAb production in vivo. And so if we look at the vision here, the slides that I showed before, with this framework in mind, what we can potentially achieve with this is something like this. We enroll the person living with the virus on antiretroviral therapy, and we give them one injection of these AAV vectors encoding bNAbs, and then they would instruct the cells in the body to produce these bNAbs, resulting in continuous persistent production of these molecules, and hopefully, if we do this right, without triggering virus rebound after ART is interrupted, hopefully with one injection. So skeletal muscle is a preferred tissue for AAV bNAb gene therapies because myocytes are abundant, easily accessible, and display little turnover. As long as the transgene product is not toxic and does not elicit host immunity, transgene expression can persist in skeletal muscle for years, if not decades. The part about not eliciting host immunity is important because we now know that gene therapy with AAV bNAb vectors can induce host anti-drug antibody responses. This is when your body responds to the molecule that the AAV is delivering. It perceives it as foreign and therefore mounts an immune response to it that either inactivates it or accelerates its clearance. So like I said, I do mostly preclinical research using monkeys. So what we see in an adult rhesus macaque is when we give the AAV vector, we see in many times, but not all the times, a brief period of bNAb expression in vivo, followed by the development of an anti-drug antibody response, or ADA response here, which coincides with the decline in expression of the bNAb. However, when we do this in a neonate macaque, we see a very different pattern. So the vast majority of newborn macaques treated with this vector will develop persistent expression of the bNAb with little or no ADAs. And we now know that neonatal tolerance enhances the effectiveness of AAV bNAb gene therapies. And this is finally published, and it's going to be out soon. But what we realized is that when we do this in juvenile macaques using an AAV antibody vector encoding the bNAb 3BNC117, we see a success rate, shown here by the green circles, of about 33%. And this rate remains relatively stable if we do this in pre-juveniles, 8 months of age, but it begins to increase when we start targeting younger infants. And when we finally reach to newborns, we see success rates of about 90%. So given the tolerance-prone immune system in early life, the first weeks after birth may provide a natural window of opportunity for improving the efficacy of AAV vector delivery of bNAbs. Now, I just want to say that the antibody that we used here, 3BNC117, is very immunogenic in the context of AAV gene therapy. This window of opportunity that I'm showing here may not apply to all molecules that we used, but we selected this one because it was particularly immunogenic. Other molecules that are less hypermutated, less unstable, or more stable than 3B and C117 may enable a longer window of opportunity, which is, of course, what we are aiming for. So just to recap, given the high rates of virologic failure in children with HIV on ART, given the safety and therapeutic efficacy of HIV-1b NAbs in children, and the fact that intramuscular gene therapy with AAV can lead to multi-year transgene expression, especially in neonates compared to adults, we came up with the following hypothesis. A combination of early ART initiation and AAV vector delivery of HIV-1b NAbs would result in persistent expression of BNAbs at levels sufficient to maintain durable control of viremia following ATI. And the way we address this hypothesis is through a non-human primate model of vertical HIV transmission through breastfeeding, and this is in collaboration with my colleagues at the Oregon National Primate Center, Nancy Haywood and Ann Hassel. The way we did this, we enrolled 10 infant rhesus macaques aged approximately 4 weeks, and we orally infected them with a simian HIV chimeric virus called SHIV-SF162b3. And then 1 week later, we placed these animals on antiretroviral therapy. At the same time, we started ART. We gave these animals AAV9 vectors encoding 2 molecules, ECD4IG here in green and 101074 in yellow. In parallel, we infected 6 control macaques and placed them on ART, but didn't give them the AAV vectors. So we have done 3 studies so far. I'm going to show you the results of study number 1 first. The way I'm going to show you this data is through graphs where viral loads are in the red circles and plotted against the left y-axis, okay? So unfortunately, I see that the gray shaded area for ART is not showing up in the slide, but ART started 1 week after infection and lasted until week 30 post-infection, just to recap. So this graph shows that essentially when we start ART 1 week after infection, viral loads are suppressed in the control macaques, no surprises here, and we see the same thing for the AAV-treated macaques, shown here as 1 animal per panel. But the panels for the AAV-treated macaques also include a right y-axis, which show the plasma concentrations of each of the molecules that we delivered. Green is ECD4IG, targeting the CD4 binding site, and yellow is 101074, targeting the V3 glycan. So the point here is, the data shown in the slides only go until the ART phase. I'm going to show you the post-ATI phase in a minute. And like I said, there should be a gray bar displaying the ART phase here, which is not coming up in the slide. So 100% of the animals developed persistent expression of ECD4IG, but expression of 1074 was more variable because a few of the animals developed the ADA responses that I talked about. But when we stopped ART, all of the controls experienced fast rebound, as you can see here. And fortunately, all of the animals continued to express the 2 molecules following ART. And because of these persistent levels of expression, we saw stringent control of the virus after ATI in 8 of the 10 SHIV-infected infant rhesus macaques, translating to an efficacy of about 80%. We did see limited rebound in 2 of the animals, but those 2 animals eventually regained control of viremia. And when we plotted this in a Kaplan-Meier graph, we see a significant delay or prevention of virus rebound, in some cases for longer than 1.5 years. So in study number 1, the animals were infected with SHIV and then placed on antiretroviral therapy 1 week after infection. This is a very short time point, which made us wonder to what extent are these encouraging results that we saw in study 1 dependent on the small reservoirs that we achieved in study 1? Would this work in animals harboring larger reservoirs? So this is the scheme of study number 1 that I just showed you. So we conducted a different study where we essentially did the same thing, but instead of starting antiretroviral therapy and giving the animals AAVs 1 week post-infection. We did so at week 3 post-infection, thereby allowing 2 additional weeks for the virus to replicate and seed the reservoir in these animals. And we did some IPDA assays. This is an assay to quantify the viral reservoirs in these animals at the time of ART initiation, and 1 week in study 1, 3 weeks in study 3, and we saw significantly higher levels of intact retroviruses in study number 2, consistent with our expectations that we would be producing larger reservoirs. So this is study 2. The data is presented in the same way. Controls are on top. AAV-treated macaques are at the bottom. And once again, every single animal developed persistent expression of ACD4IG with variable levels of 1074 expression due to ADA responses, which, by the way, were transient in infants. In adults, the ADA responses, the few infants that developed ADA responses against 1074 eventually stopped making those ADAs, allowing 1074 to rebound, shown here in the animal at the bottom left corner. When we stopped ART, again, all control animals became viremic relatively fast, and we saw this persistent expression in circulation of the 2 molecules, which again translated to stable, stringent virologic control with 86% efficacy in this study. There was 1 animal that experienced virus rebound and remained viremic despite persistent expression of ECD4IG. So, and this was statistically significant. I need to wrap up. So just to summarize, we have I've shown you results of 2 independent studies where early ART initiation plus AAV vector delivery of ECD4 and 1074 prevented or significantly delayed virus rebound in perinatally sheath-infected infant macaques following ART interruption. So this approach worked when the interventions were given 1 or 3 weeks post-sheath infection, and I didn't have the time to show you this, but we were able to transiently stop production of the BNAbs in circulation. The virus came back, indicating that we really need this persistent expression of the molecules to maintain control of the virus in this system. And we are in the process of doing a 3rd study using IgG1 versions of these 2 molecules, which are supposed to have greater antiviral activity against infected cells. And we already know that the study works, so we are monitoring these animals now for reservoir levels. So just to quickly go through some of the advantages of this approach: efficacy does not require patient adherence. AAV-expressed BNAbs are less immunogenic in infants than in adults. It's easy to administer this. It only took 4 intramuscular injections given once and never again, hopefully. The AAV vectors are thermostable. They are stable for weeks at 4 degrees, months at -20, years indefinitely at -80. It's relatively cost-effective because these vectors are dosed by body mass, and infants weigh a fraction of what adults do, so you technically need less AAV to treat infants than adults. And finally, BNAb expression may last for years. But there are some limitations to consider, of course. We used 1 virus here in the study, which does not really recapitulate the diversity of HIV. There's cost and equitable access. Cell and gene therapies remain prohibitively expensive, but hopefully with a number of ways that we can address this, we can hopefully make this more accessible. And finally, there may be pre-existing immunity to AAV in the population, which needs to be accounted for. So this is my acknowledgement slide. Finally, this study was funded by the PAVE Martin Delaney Collaboratory, for which I'm very grateful. And thank you very much.